There's always something new from our sponsor, Text Control. They just released version 30 of their document processing library that includes new document collaboration features. Using TX Text Control, you can integrate online document editing, document signing, collaboration, and PDF processing into your ASP.NET and ASP.NET Core web applications. Whether you need to create PDF invoices, quotations, or reports, TX Text Control provides the developer libraries for all document-related tasks. Check out the new features and see their technologies in action by visiting the live demo at demos.textcontrol.com. That's demos.textcontrol.com. Hey friends, I'm Scott Hanselman, and it's another episode of Hansel Minutes. Today I'm chatting with Erica Brescia. She's a managing director at Redpoint, formerly the CEO at GitHub, a founder at Bitnami, a member of lots of different boards, including the Linux Foundation. And today she's chatting with me about her new role at Redpoint. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thanks for having me.
You know, I always go to people's LinkedIn before the show because I got to do all the research. So many podcasts have people just kind of come on and chat, and I don't like that. So I do all this research, and sometimes I look at LinkedIn's and I just get like LinkedIn low self-esteem. Do you ever do that? You're like, you have an amazing LinkedIn, and you ever like look
all
at someone
time.
else's and you're like, oh my God, look at their LinkedIn. It's so good. There's so many things.
all the time. All the time. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So you have a focus on business, but you've been in tech forever. So like, are you know how people say, well, I'm technical, I'm not technical. You're both technical. You're a bridge between the tech and the business. But do you code?
No, sadly, no. It's one of my kind of great regrets in life that I didn't get into coding when I was younger, and maybe the only one. Yeah, I've always had a very curious mind, and I started learning about Linux and open source back in 2004 via Scientific American article, and was just really intrigued by this kind of movement that was happening. So I've always been interested in technical things, like how things work, how cell phone networks work was one of the first things that I got into that I found interesting, and then kind of stumbled upon open source and really got enamored, I think, with the community and the movement. And then, the idea of building a software company that would make it easier for people to consume and use and build really cool things with software. So all of my technical knowledge has really been learned by osmosis.
Well, that's the way most of it happens. All the knowledge that I learned in college is over. Like all those things are dead. Everything I've learned was how to learn after the fact.
Exactly. How to ask good questions and how to surround myself with folks who have the patience to teach me. Like, I'll never forget my co-founder at Bitnami sitting me down like in front of a whiteboard and explaining how PGP encryption works and what a reverse proxy is and all of those fun things.
Yeah. So then you are technical. You're just not in a coding role, which is a thing I've been talking. A lot of people apologize for not being technical. You can't exactly be the CEO of GitHub and not like know how stuff works. I'm curious though. So you've been doing this for a long time. I don't want to date you, but
Yeah.
Bitnami that you started, I want to say 2003.
We started a company called BitRock, which became Bitnami later in 2005.
Okay. And at this point, virtual machines were kind of starting to become a thing. And then you had a co-founder. Was this a typical kind of Gates and Ballmer, where there's like the technical and the business, the COO and the CTO kind of a relationship? Is that a good relationship for a company to get started on?
Well, I don't think I ever want to compare myself to
I apologize.
Ballmer.
You know what I'm saying, though.
No, I get it. No, I love it. It's actually funny. I might send him a funny image later of a mock-up of that. But yes, Daniel is a deeply technical person, had been engineering since he was a kid, as you often see, and really had a lot of depth on like the product side and also product strategy and a real sense of what developers need and want. And I had experience, building businesses, building teams, driving sales, things like that. So we were very complementary, and it gave us an opportunity to kind of divide and conquer when it came to building Bitnami, right? He would lead the product and engineering teams and drive really the product strategy. And then I would kind of build the business and the team to support the execution of those things.
Mm-hmm. And the Daniel you're referring to for our listeners is Daniel Lopez
Ridruejo, yeah.
Ridruejo, and you founded this in Spain back in the day.
Correct. Yes, he's Spanish. So a lot of folks think it's amazingly cool that I lived in Spain, and I suppose it was, but we were still a typical kind of Silicon Valley style startup, right? We were just locked in an apartment all the time, coding in the Seville heat.
Is that the magic number, though? Is two the right thing? Like, can a person do this all by themselves? Can they be a COO and a CTO at the same time? Or is a partnership what you look for when you're seeing, founders of companies that are going to be successful?
I think both work. I've certainly backed some amazing solo founders as well as amazing teams. And if you are a solo founder starting out on your own, I think the real key is to surround yourself with a team of folks that can take some of the work off of your plate, right? When I'm working with a solo founder, one of the first things I often have them do is to find someone to offload some of the administrative work to, whether that's someone they hire into the company, or whether it's kind of an outsourced service. But you really can't do it all. And as a technical founder, the most important things that you need to focus on are building your product, building your team, and, if it's open source, building your community.
Mm-hmm. So you definitely are not a fan of the Herculean effort. Like, hard work is one thing, but hurting yourself as a solo founder is not necessarily the way to get success.
I think every founder that I think we see in back has a lot of hustle and they work hard, and they're just, they do it because they love it. And there are a lot of Herculean efforts that go into it, but it's really, to me, about what makes the best use of your time and how are you delivering the best strategic value to the company. And if your superpower is writing code and building the product and maybe talking about what you've built, and for a developer company, engaging other developers around what you're building, it's probably not the best use of your time to be like mailing out laptops to people or getting stickers printed or booking flights or, just the myriad things that as you actually start building a team need to happen, right? As soon as you hit like 7 to 10 people, even, there's all this stuff that comes up. And, what I see often is the founder will think, oh, this is just a one-off thing I have to do. Oh, I just have to do this once. Oh, I just have to do this once. And then I'm like, but how much of your time is that taking? And how much mental overhead is it? And, for folks who are developers, I think there's so much value in like getting in flow, right? And having these uninterrupted chunks of time to actually just go build and think. And if you're dealing with a ton of the interruptions that come with building a team and a company and just the operational stuff, you don't have as much time to get into flow, and I think it can slow you down. So, I'm certainly not advocating building this really bulky, bloated team early on, but I am saying that it's important to think about how you spend your time and surround yourselves with people who can take work that's either not non-strategic or maybe not something that is a superpower for you and a skill you don't have to develop, and like get that off your plate. It doesn't add value.
So I'm definitely hearing a pattern of intentionality in what you're saying. Like, why am I doing this? Like, you should be asking yourself in any task, is this the thing that is going to be most impactful for the business at this stage at all times? Always reminding yourself of that.
It's one of the most important things you can do as a founder. And the other thing I tell founders to think about as soon as they have more of a team is there someone else that can do this? Like, every time you go to do a task, ask yourself, is there someone else that can take care of this? It is hard and it takes time. But if you're, a developer who's looking to grow into a CEO type of role over time, then you need to learn to start delegating and build that into your workflow early. Or again, you're just not going to be spending your time on the most important things for the company. So it's an important skill to develop.
Okay, but then looking at your career, it feels like you have been a COO and the chief operating officer for a lot. It seems like chief operating officers are kind of like this quiet, keep the light on people, and people don't realize that they're doing like all the stuff you just described. They're doing like most of the work. So like the CEO is being strategic and the CFO is working about the balance sheet and the COO just, constantly is saving everyone's life and they don't even know it's happening. Is that fair to say?
That has certainly been the case. So I think, it really depends. And the truth is there are different types of COOs and those vary based on the rest of the executive team. And the CEO's skills and also the stage of the company. So, I've done virtually every aspect of building and running a company, from like sales to BD to operational stuff to system implementation, you name it. And I remember actually Nat said this. He said my role was kind of gaseous because it just like expanded to fill whatever gaps there were in the team or the company. And I think that's true when you have a really quickly growing business with things and the organization is constantly evolving. Having someone that can like pick up different parts of the business or kind of bootstrap and start a new initiative and then spin up a team to run it is really useful. For some CEOs, their COO is kind of, their right hand and just takes on kind of whatever the CEO doesn't want to spend time on. And other times there's a really clear just divide and conquer, like, hey, I'm going to focus on the product and customers. And, I just want you to keep everything else running. Sometimes the COO is expected to be a successor to the CEO. Sometimes they're not. It really depends on, the makeup of the team and what the company needs at any point in time.
Mm-hmm. The Nat that you refer to, of course, Nat Friedman, former CEO of GitHub and also an investor as well. So when you've started companies, you've sold companies, you've made deals with big companies, when does one decide, I'm pretty good at this and now I need to help other people do this? Like, did you just wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a full-time investor?
I didn't. As with many things, at least in my life, I did not have some kind of concrete plan about if or when I would move into investing. I built a lot of relationships over my career. And, I had several firms reaching out to me talking about how they wanted to build their team and they were looking for people with more operational experience. In my particular case, I wasn't looking to or even thinking about leaving GitHub when these calls started coming in. But when you have conversations like that, these were people that I respect, whose calls I would always take, even if I didn't intend on acting on them. It did get me thinking about, what brings me the most joy and what I think my own superpowers are and what I might be able to bring to founders that are early in their startup journey and thinking through how to scale the business. And, upon reflection and talking with a bunch of other folks that had moved from operational roles into venture, I realized that I love working with founders. I have made countless mistakes throughout my career and I've learned so much from them. And if I can partner with founders and help them learn from my experience and as a result be better set up to build a successful company, to me, there's no greater joy in that. And it gives me a lot of energy. So, it's been an absolute blast so far. I'm still learning every day. I'm sure I'll have a different perspective a year from now, but it's really nice to be able to have all of my time to work with founders as opposed to, when I was at GitHub or even at Bitnami, I was doing some investing on my own. But, the time that I had to do that was very late at night or on the weekends. And I didn't feel like I had the amount of time or focus that I wanted to be able to give to the founders that I was investing in. And that's what finally kind of made me decide to flip over to investing full time.
Okay. Hey, friends, I want to take a second and thank our sponsor, Zencastr. You know that I've been doing Hansel Minutes now for over 850 episodes. And in the old days, I would have a guest manually install Audacity and they would FTP their WAV file to me. And it was a mess. But for the last several hundred episodes, I've been using Zencastr. It's an all-in-one podcast production suite. It runs entirely in the browser. It's got now video, HD video. It's got built-in voice chat. I do footnotes. I've got a soundboard for live editing. It's absolutely brilliant. And it also uploads to my cloud. The guest shows up, they go to a URL, they record, and the next thing you know, in my Dropbox or my cloud storage, a file appears. It's absolutely brilliant, and they've even now got automatic transcripts. And they are now sponsoring the show, and you can go to Zencastr, ZENCASTR.com/pricing, and use my code HanselMinutes, and you'll get 30% off your first 3 months of Zencastr Professional. I want you to have the same easy experience that I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story with Zencastr. So I want to parse a few things for our audience. We've got a very diverse audience of folks from all over the world. And when they hear VC and they hear managing directors and founders, they're thinking about, well, there must be a pile of billions of dollars and all the rich people get to decide. I want to break some of this down a little bit. So you said that you did a little bit of light investing on your own for the purposes of the conversation as well as transparency. I have invested, we'll just say, Honda Civic money in 2 different companies, a networking startup and an IoT company. They gave me something called a safe. Maybe you can explain that to me. And I gave them the price of a used car. I'm not millions of dollars rich. I can't go and make a foundation, but am I an angel investor? Or am I just doing a friends and family round? What am I doing with my little money here and there?
A lot of people use a lot of different terms, and I'm not sure there's a total standard. But the way that I think about it is there are angel investors, and then there are professional angel investors, and then there are like seed investors. And then you can think about like more formal venture capital. Now, I would say that an angel investor is someone who from time to time makes their own investments, but that it's not their day job, right? I think of professional angel investors as people who are making, usually dozens of angel investments per year, and they see it as kind of their full-time job. They probably are investing their own money. Sometimes they spin up what I would consider to be a seed fund, which is like, a very early stage fund that might write small checks, but maybe they're accepting investment dollars from other people. It's not just their own money, right? They're investing on behalf of others.
Okay. So let me see if I can paraphrase and make sure I understand. So if I had millions of dollars and I started giving some money to my cousin, he's got a startup, and this person who they introduced me to, they got a startup. I start being an angel, and then I start doing it dozens of times a year. I quit my job and I'm like, wow, this is great. I've got a ton of money. I'll go and invest a bunch. I'd have to make a little office, but I'm doing it all by myself. What if I then start collecting money from other people who say, hey, you're smart. You seem to have the hookup. I'll give you some money. And then I go and invest it. I'm pretty professional at that point. Is that safe to say?
Yeah. I mean, I would consider you a professional angel, even if you're only investing your own money, but you're doing a high volume of deals and that's your primary job. You're not going to work and leading a company and then doing that on the side, right?
Well, I'm at the done it twice friends and family stage of the give it to your money to your cousin. Okay. So then I hear the word, managing partner and I hear, full-time VC. When you join a company, that company has a pile of money. How much of it's yours? And do you get a paycheck? And what if the company becomes the next Facebook? Folks who are engineers don't understand this stuff.
Great. So I'm going to explain at a high level, and then we can maybe dig into some of the details. So one thing you should know is titles are not consistent across venture capital. So different things. Some people use partners and VPs and managing directors and general partners. A managing director is typically the same as a general partner. So what that means in the context of Redpoint, at least, is that there are a group of us that collectively essentially run the firm and share ownership in the firm and make all of the firm decisions, which could include things like when do we raise a new fund? How big are the funds? How many different funds do we have? What's our branding strategy as a firm, right? You think of it like it's like a business, and probably the closest parallel is this would be like a partner at a law firm who's shares in the ownership of the law firm, right? And then we have a team of investment professionals and a lot of other folks who do work on behalf of our founders, help them with recruiting and marketing and customer introductions and things like that. We call those folks our founder experience team. And then we have our investment team. So the investment team gets a salary, but everybody in the firm also shares in the upside of the fund performance, right? Some of them will put money into the fund. Some of them don't, depending on their role. But everybody gets some reward based on the performance of the fund, whether you're helping us, operate and run efficiently as like an executive assistant or an operations manager, or you're an investor. And then the general partners get paid out of something called operating fees. So when you raise capital, and I'll get to where that comes from in a minute, you're charging a fee on that capital, like a very small percentage. It's often like 2%, that covers the cost of things like having an office, paying everybody's salaries, branding, hosting
Like when you
events for
donate to the
founders.
Red Cross, it doesn't send exactly $100 to the people. They have to
Exactly.
keep the lights
They
on.
have to keep the lights on. Exactly.
Gotcha.
So like what's left over from those fees goes to the general partners or the MDs, right? So we kind of just like take what's left. So you don't really get a salary. Again, similar to a law firm. In terms of where the money comes from, most of our investment dollars comes from what's called a limited partner or LP. And those can be, hedge funds. I met with an endowment this morning. It can be nonprofits. It can be retirement systems, folks like that who are looking at, preserving and growing their capital base, right? And so they invest in a VC fund, and then we deploy that capital. Now, that being said, we all as individuals also commit our own capital to the fund. We think it's important to have our own skin in the game. And we do have at the general partner level, like a minimum expectation of how much money we put in. We also have a cap on how much money we can put in because you want to leave enough room for LPs. If you're a successful VC fund, when you go to raise a new fund, you almost always have more interest in investing in the fund than you can actually accommodate because of the size of fund you want to raise. Like you might get 2 or 3 times the interest as the amount of money you want to raise. So we need to balance our own contributions to making enough room for our LPs to invest the amount of dollars that they want to make sense for their own goals.
Okay, so then the L in LP is limited, which means that they don't get to call and say, hey, I don't want you investing in that, or I want to be in the room. Like, right, if the Policeman's Benevolent Fund decides to, invest some of percentage of their retirement to you, just like on watching Billions on Showtime, Axe Capital goes and invests $1 billion from some big retirement fund. We want to make sure that they're making an investment, but they don't get to tell you, don't invest in containers or no crypto or only web things, right? They're limited.
Correct. They are limited. To get into the technical details, there are covenants that we have with our LPs. Like for a normal fund, hey, no more than X% of our fund will go into crypto. Or there are certain things like we don't invest in firearms, right? And there are many LPs who will have some specific requirements around that generally are, very reasonable and things that we wouldn't do anyway, like investing in firearms, for example. But there are some kind of general limitations, but other than that, they do not weigh in on a deal by deal basis. They really look at the returns and the performance that we've delivered over time to inform whether or not they want to renew. And we also look at, what have they been like to work with as an LP when we decide if we want to invite them to invest in a future fund.
Interesting. Okay, so this is super helpful. I hope that I'm starting to feel like lights are going on and like little neurons that are reminding me of like how the world works is super helpful. I do a lot of like CTO for a day, kind of like light advising, where I'm doing what you call BS detection on someone's technical plan and talking to early founders who are pre-pitch. And every once in a while, I'll meet somebody, and I think you probably had this happen too, where it's just like, oh wow, I don't know what you're doing or where you're going, but I want to invest in you. Like you just know that person when you meet them. Is that when you say, I want to be a board member? I want to be a participant in your thing. Like I'm not going to join you as a founder, but I want to keep track of you. And are investors within a VC firm allowed to be all on the board of a company, or is that a conflict of interest?
So I think it's important to distinguish between an advisory board and a board of directors, which are two very different things, right? A board of directors is established at the time that the company is really formed, and then it can grow over time. And when a VC firm makes an offer to invest, there are typically some requirements or shared expectations created around the board and who will be on it, because the board is what votes on very key matters for the company. It is the board, depending on a lot of rules and things like that might end up replacing a CEO, though hopefully, that never has to happen, but it has before. Certainly for those who have seen Super Pumped, you can see a little bit of at least one version of the Uber story and what happened there. But those folks are responsible and really have a responsibility to the business, not the founder, to the company, to give the best guidance and help drive the right decisions to make the company as successful as possible. Now, many founders also choose to spin up what's called a board of advisors, and they may engage just industry experts to weigh in on certain things that they might want to call for advice and things like that. And they sometimes give those folks equity. In most cases, we advise against doing that. And what we tell founders is, you can basically get the same thing in most cases by inviting people to invest instead of just giving them a board seat with equity. Say, hey, look, the stock in the company is the lowest price it's ever going to be. If you really believe in this and you want to work with me, write me a check. It doesn't even have to be a big check in most cases. It's more so everybody has skin in the game and you're kind of aligned rather than just giving out equity. In some rare cases, the equity can make sense, but in most, folks are willing to put a little bit of money in and they get equity that way. And then kind of founders can tap into them as needed as they're building out the product based on the person's expertise.
Interesting. All right. So if I go after this podcast and I sit down with my friend at Starbucks and we sketch something out on the back of a napkin, and that moment where we register the domain at a Starbucks or a Panera, now we're founders. How much distance is between that moment at that cafe and then pitching in front of you?
Oh, wow. It depends on so many different things. If you are a known quantity in the sense that you have built or shipped something important, or people say, hey, look, I know Scott. I've listened to Scott over the years. Scott is absolutely brilliant. If he has this great idea, I'm going to back him, right? And folks have certainly invested at that stage in companies before. I'll give you a specific example for me. One of the first deals I did when joining Redpoint is a company called Dagger, and it's from the founders of Docker. I've known those folks for a very long time. I was having coffee with Solomon actually before I even joined Redpoint, and he started talking to me about what this team had gotten together to build. And this is an unbelievable team. And they were still in private beta. So they had actually built something, but it wasn't in the hands of many users. But it was so clear to me, given the team, given their unique experience and subject matter expertise and their vision for what they wanted to build, that I wanted to be in and partner with them, right? So the reality is, if you've done something before, it doesn't have to be founding a company. But if you've shipped something big, if you've done something that builds confidence in folks and your ability to build something truly special, it may be very early that you have a conversation with VCs. I mean, typically you're raising some from friends and family or a very early stage seed firm first. And then, you'll raise a more like formal like VC round in the future. To give you an example, I was part of a group called X Factor Ventures, which is all women founders who have started and scaled companies who are investing a small fund. It has LPs, but the latest fund is about $7 million in companies founded by women or folks who identify as women. And we were often the first check in, right? And we would write $150,000 checks into founders. And oftentimes it's a few people, an idea, maybe a mock up or something like that. They tend to not have, much by way of product yet. It's often just like a founding team that's ready to go start, maybe hiring one person. And they would usually raise from us and other folks as well. But that's, what a very, very early kind of, now it's called a pre-seed deal, might look like.
And then for context for our friends that are listening, Solomon Hykes, who founded Docker, left Docker in 2018, and now working on Dagger, which is to improve CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. So let me ask you this, though, then. You just gave the example of a person being a known quantity and that they've shipped something. How do you balance that with either underrepresented or underestimated people who may not have a friends and family round that they can just call? I mean, I can't call my dad and get anything other than lunch. You know what I mean? Because you want to have a balanced portfolio. Yep. How do you find those folks and make sure that they get a seat at the table too?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And that's one of the reasons I like going out and speaking in different places and different podcasts, trying to reach different audiences, because the reality is the world is very big and there's a lot of talent out there. And I can't always go out and proactively find every single person with a great idea, right? So I try to put myself out there and be approachable to folks and then provide early coaching based on what they're trying to build. How much money does it take? Like, are they a developer so they can write it themselves? Do they need somebody else to partner with to write it? Do they have a co-founder? Do they need one? There's all these like early questions that you can kind of work through regardless of, whether or not you've built something in the past. I will say, just to be totally candid, because I think that's important. And sometimes people don't want to say the hard things. I mean, VCs look for something called founder market fit, right? And so you're looking for somebody who has a unique understanding and ability to build in a market. Now, that could be anything, right? Maybe you're building a point of sale system, and it's because you worked your way through college or junior college or whatever. You supported yourself by working at a Starbucks or something, and you saw how bad the point of sale system was. And so you have an idea for fixing it, right? It doesn't mean you have to have shipped, a major feature for Stripe or something, but like, there are a lot of smart and driven people in the world. There needs to be something that gives you an advantage, I think, in a space to be successful, a unique perspective. And so we will look for that in founders. And I think virtually every VC will look at that in founders, because you need something to look to say, hey, do I think this person has the opportunity to be successful? The reality is, of course, I want to help, all amazing founders, and in particular, folks who are underrepresented in tech or may have come from like non-traditional backgrounds or don't have the same access to education or capital. At the same time, I also have a responsibility to our LP base to produce returns on their investment, right? And so I can't just be totally altruistic and like, hey, I want to help you because you have hustle and you're smart and you deserve a chance. Like, there has to be a reason I believe this person is uniquely qualified to build something important.
Yeah, I think that's the phrase that's going to stick with me, is that uniquely qualified to build something important. Folks can go back and look at other previous shows. A couple of weeks ago, I had Charu Thomas on, CEO of Ox, who had done a very important paper on augmented reality and is now turning that into a company to improve the supply chain with augmented reality. So she had technical experience in school, had written papers on the subject, and then turned that into a business. Just an example. And then she actually has a very successful company, the CEO, and she's in Northwest Arkansas. She did a startup accelerator and ended up there, and now has a whole a whole company. Just one example. And also things like the Genius Project out of Oakland and Digital Undivided, other great companies that are showing underrepresented and underestimated folks how they can invest. This has been super helpful. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
It's been great, Scott. And I hope folks learned something. And if they have more questions, I hope they'll hit me up on Twitter, LinkedIn, however they want to reach out. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm Erica at Redpoint. Follow up with questions, folks.
Yep. Follow up with Erica Brescia on Twitter and on LinkedIn. She is supporting incredible founders as an investor at Redpoint. This has been another episode of Hansel Minutes, and we'll see you again next week.